So let's have a sesh on place. So place is about how the product gets from the producer to the consumer. You need to think of it like the path the product takes. And this is referred to, this path, as the channel of distribution. The three most common channels of distribution are here. The first is from the producer to the consumer. The second is from the producer to the retailer to the consumer. And the third, the most cumbersome, is from the producer to the wholesaler to the retailer to the consumer. Remember, that's the path that the product takes from the producer to the consumer, how the consumer gets the good. Let's go through the pros and the cons of each of these three channels of distribution. So the first, which is from a producer to a consumer, is sometimes called a direct channel of distribution. The pros are, there's no wholesaler involved, there's no retailer involved because it's going directly, as in number one. So therefore, because there's no wholesaler and no retailer, no cut is taken. Therefore, you could possibly charge lower prices to your consumers. Lower prices, more demand, more sales. The cons of going from a producer to a consumer. Well, it's likely that the consumers will be buying in small volume. You're not getting your sales from a wholesaler, you're not getting your sales from a retailer, you're getting them directly from the consumer. So it's likely the consumer will buy smaller quantities. And because they're buying smaller quantities or smaller volume, well, it means you're going to have higher distribution costs because you're going to have to sell to these consumers who are going to be in multiple destinations. That's lots of post and packaging, that's lots of logistics. Also, you might have an issue with marketing because you are the producer trying to sell to the consumer. So it's possible you'll have low reach because no one's aware of your good. So therefore you'll have to do more marketing costs. And that's going to impact your profit in the long term. Now let's look at the second of these channels of distribution, from the producer to the retailer to the consumer. Well, the pros of doing this is it's a way to overcome this marketing issue, because you're selling to the retailer, and retailers usually have high reach. High reach because they're well known and they might have multiple locations. Or it might be an internet retailer known as an e-tailer, and they might have a well-known internet website. But that's great for you because you, as the producer, the consumers are buying it from the retailer who you've sold to. But don't forget, the retailers or the e-tailers are still trying to make profit. So you won't receive the full price that the consumer pays because the retailer is trying to make a markup, a margin. And also, if you're selling to many retailers, well then you might still have big distribution costs, big logistics costs to consider. The third is the producer, wholesaler, retailer, consumer, the most cumbersome of all the channels of distribution. Let's look at the pros. So the pros is that the wholesaler buys in bulk. You're selling to the wholesaler. The wholesaler is not going to buy one or two. They're going to buy enormous volume. So that kind of guarantees you some sales. The second thing is that you're selling to the wholesaler who's buying enormous volume. So therefore your distribution costs might be less because you're not going to all those multiple destinations. You might just be going to one destination. So it's going to be cheaper. Also, because you're selling to the wholesaler, it might be less risk for you because you know it just gets to the wholesaler and the wholesaler handles it from there. And number three is that you've still got a retailer involved in this process. So you've still got those marketing gains that the retailer have because they're going to have that higher reach still. They're still involved in this process in number three. So that's a great thing. It means less marketing costs for you. However, there are cons to using this type of channel of distribution. The biggest one is that you've involved a wholesaler and you've involved a retailer, so clearly they both want to make a cut, a profit, and so there's going to be a margin that's lost. Think about like this, so you, the producer, sell to the wholesaler for £3. The wholesaler might sell the good to the retailer for £4, and the retailer will sell the product to the consumer for £6. So you were happy with £3, but the consumer actually paid £6. You only actually got half of the total price. Therefore, you've had to charge higher prices because you've used this channel of distribution. And because you've got higher prices, it means that it might actually lead to overall less sales from the consumer because they're not happy with that higher price. And also, a thing to think about is that if you use a producer, wholesaler, retailer, consumer channel of distribution, you as the producer are so far away from the consumer, so you might not be able to provide the customer service that is required or what the consumer expects because you're so far away from that consumer. Now let's look at the evaluation points for place. Well, the first evaluation point is that it depends on if you've got the finances and you can make profit if you're going to be producing, distributing and marketing, if you're able to do all three of those things. Because if yes, you can do them and you can make profit, then maybe it makes sense to go the direct route, the direct channel of distribution from the producer to the consumer. If marketing is going to be an issue for you, then you might want to bring in the retailer. So therefore you might want to go the producer, retailer, consumer angle. And if marketing and distributing is going to be an issue for you, whatever that may, for whatever reason, well then you might need to go the producer and sell to the wholesaler, who sells to the retailer, who sells to the consumer route. So it will definitely depend on if you can finance it, having all of these areas in your business, and if you can make profit doing them all. The second one is that it depends on the volume of stock you produce. Are you making massive amounts of stock? Because if you are, you might want to consider multi-channels of distribution. There is nothing stopping you using more than one or all of these channels of distribution. Many businesses do it. Apple, for example, uses multi-channel distributions. For more details on multi-channel distributions, the pros and the cons, please click the card up there. So, multi-channel distribution is massive. Also, with doing that, if you bring in the retailer, you're getting more exposure. If you are bringing in the wholesaler, you're able to sell that stock in bulk. That might give you more cash in the short term and also will free up some storage space. And the third thing to think about, very important, is you're the producer. You want to know about the retailer or the e-tailer's image and reputation. Because if they are low end, retailer or e-tailer, and their perception of that particular retailer isn't great, well that might actually cheapen the image of your good. On the other side, if the retailer or e-tailer has a great reputation, you as a producer selling in that store might actually make your good seem more luxurious. I hope that helps, and I'll see you at the next sesh.